There we go. Welcome to ALN Thursday at 3. My name is Mike Bordenaro, and we're very happy to have Jennifer Mims, the Director of Asset Management at Jacobs, joining Jim Dieter today in a conversation. Jacobs is a asset management powerhouse, and we're very happy that they are not a platinum organizational member like Onuma System, but they are a patron member. And we really appreciate their involvement. And we also appreciate the involvement of our organizational members. So with that, I will say that we've got a lot of other programs coming up next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. We have an ESG conversation. We have a value and benefits from asset management program with the Australian Asset Management Council coming up the following week. And then after that, we've got a program with the Institute of Asset Management on asset management leadership, a paper that we have co-published with the IAM. So we've got a lot of good programs with many related associations, and we hope we're bringing additional value to you through those. And if you have any questions today, you can use the chat section, or you can use the Q&A. And we look forward to a lively chat discussion. And with that, I'll bring on Jim Dieter, who is the ALN co-founder and the CEO, and he's also with Jacobs these days. Welcome, Jim.
Hey. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here with Jennifer today. I was calling Jacobs to try to get Jacobs to join the ALN, and ended up having several interesting conversations with Jennifer, which led surprisingly first to her offering me a job. Part-time, only part-time. But and then from there, Jacobs has joined the ALN as a patron member, as Mike just mentioned. And we can talk more about some of the things that we're going to be working on from there. But Jennifer, welcome. It's great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you and Mike inviting me to speak.
You know, we're over 100 of these now. Yeah, I think we're approaching 150 or something of interviews. It's really been a lot of fun, just to get to know people and to let other people get to know you. So usually we start with a question, some version of what's your origin story? How did you get to where you are today in asset management?
Yeah, so yeah, interesting question. I know you sort of gave me a heads up that that's sort of the softball question that you tend to ask all interviewers. So I started doing some reflection, and I've been working sort of in the space of asset management for over 20 years now. So for quite some time. It makes me feel very old saying that, as well as looking into the camera and seeing all my gray. So, but I actually got involved in asset management. I was working for the Port of Seattle at the time, and I was hired in the Port of Seattle by the CEO. He was doing some exploratory work with the Port of Singapore that involved software and these type of things. So I was brought in to work on that. Quickly, it was determined that that wasn't a viable path for the Port of Seattle to pursue. So I ended up getting pulled into the IT department, and I wasn't, the technical IT person, but sort of that business liaison person. And I started working at the airport. They were, this again is going to age me, but it was when they're called FIDS, Flight Information Display Systems, putting all the info out there on, what airlines departure times and arrival times. If you recall, it used to be every airline had their own systems. So this was bringing it to. So I sort of got involved in IT from that perspective. And then my next assignment was, hey, we have a facilities department at the airport. They've implemented a system. It's broken. Go fix it. So I was sort of put on special assignment to go work with their facility team at CTAC. The system they had implemented was Maximo. They had pulled in a consultant that I felt like really led them down this odd path. It was about, they were focused on materials management, and they loaded up this distribution center, and they all actually procured all these like critical spare parts and everything. It was just really the wrong place to start. But anyways, that was how I first got involved with asset management. So they pulled me in, they wanted some support with this very expensive system that they had implemented. And so I started sort of digging in, and it became apparent really quickly there was no high level vision. They didn't have sort of a vision around asset management, or even what they were trying to do with Maximo. And those of you that know Maximo, I mean, it's a great, very robust system, but it's a very expensive system. So you don't want to use it if it's just a work order system. And that's essentially what they were doing. So that was how I sort of got drawn into asset management. So early on, it was very like facilities and maintenance focused, and that was sort of where I started. And then it sort of builds out from there as you start to say, okay, it's not just about maintenance, it's about the bigger value of the assets, and it's about the organization, and it's about breaking down these silos. But yeah, that was about 20 years ago that I started doing that work. I stayed with the Port of Seattle for many years, focused on strategic asset management. For about, I'm going to say about 8 or so years, I was focused there. And then eventually I joined Jacobs in the consulting space, where I've been for about the last 9 years. Yeah.
So you've worked at a lot of other airports since then, right?
Yeah. So joining Jacobs, I came on to work specifically with LAX. Same thing. They had come up, they were building a new terminal, Tom Bradley International Terminal. They knew asset management was important. And this is a trend we see right now, right? I mean, there's so much focus around asset management. I think even the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, like organizations get that, oh, asset management, we need to be in the game. They have no idea what that means, or what it is that they need to do. So at LAX, it was the same thing. They were building a new terminal. They knew they needed to, or the leadership wanted to have a plan for asset management. So I got pulled in. It was the same thing they had implemented. They also chose Maximo. And it tended to be this, like, there was no plan, there was no processes, there was no intended use of this data. It was sort of lacking all the systems that you really want to wrap around a strategic asset management program. So I got pulled into that, ended up working with them for about 5 years. Again, a heavy focus was on maintenance, right? And that, I think that that's a very solid starting point, because it's a huge opportunity for organizations to save O&M dollars. So if their maintenance folks can become more efficient and really start to understand how their assets are performing, it's almost like programs can build out from there. So yeah, started at CTAC and work with LAX. I'm doing work with Pittsburgh. We're doing work with Atlanta Hartsfield. Have been doing some work with Denver. So airports is where I sort of grew up with asset management. And so it tends to be my space that I get pulled into a lot. But I'm sure everybody listening, and we all know, like, the principles are the same, whether you're working with cities and municipalities, airports, water, the big ideas and the challenges are still the same.
For sure. So I know you worked with the Coast Guard for a while. I had a chance to work with the Coast Guard people in Jacobs for a little bit. So how was that different than the airports?
Interesting. Yeah, I think that was one of my first assignments. I don't know if Jack Dempsey's on, but Jack threw me a lifeline as a newbie consultant, because it is a transition working as an owner operator to becoming a consultant. But I got pulled in early on to work on the Coast Guard. We have, a large asset management program that we've been working with them for, I think it's over 10 years now. I was specifically focused on developing a facility management guide to try to come up with standards across the organization for their not for all their boats, but the infrastructure that they have, all the buildings and those type of things. It was different in a way. I mean, every organization you go into has its own culture. I mean, you know this very well now about Jacobs. You have a very good sense now of the Jacobs culture. So with every organization, there's a different set of challenges that are faced. You know, Coast Guard being part of the DoD, I think, you know, there are many, it tends to be a military culture. So lots of rules and documentations and very like trying to eliminate as much gray in the space as possible. But, you know, the challenges were the same, and, you know, sort of where I'm always drawn to with asset management is the organizational challenges, right? Because those are consistent. Like, how do you get an organization that has a top-down vision that they're able to effectively implement? And, you know, one thing we do know is you need that vision. You know, a lot of organizations start and they don't even have it. They just start in this sort of very middle kind of space. But in that way, it was very similar. There was, you know, a visionary in Coast Guard who brought us in. Very infrequently as a consultant do we have this opportunity to be brought in from the beginning, like a real, you know, blank canvas, you know, green field, where it's like, you know, we're going to start at the very beginning and sort of build this like really strategic program. We're thrown in right in the middle and trying to, you know, it's that analogy of trying to change a car on a wheel on a car going down the freeway at 80 miles an hour. That's always where we get thrown in as consultants. So the challenge is like, how do we lead strategically? And remember, we were brought in for the bigger strategic vision. But then the reality of it is we need to get very tactical and work with what the program already is. And, you know, so how do we, you know, come in and do both of those things? And it was very similar with the Coast Guard. It was like, how do we plug and be in lockstep on their vision of asset management? And then there's the reality. Coast Guard also uses Maximo. I'm not plugging Maximo at all, but they also use Maximo, right? So they had their set ways that were very entrenched with how they were going to use that system. And we weren't going to go in and change that. So, you know, how do we support that as a consultant and bringing in our expertise? That's sort of the tactical low-hanging fruit, getting in there and making a real impact, while also, you know, walking alongside leadership to help them realize their long-term vision.
And one of the things that I picked up from Coast Guard, which is, when you think about it, seems obvious, but, you know, when you think about it operationally, is that there's just this incredible turnover in every position. So there's just a lot of requirement to document what needs to get done. And people actually pay attention to the documentation often of what needs to get done.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just I forget their rotations, but you know that they're going to happen. Yeah, so preparing for those rotations. It reminds me of a funny story. I'm going to apologize if anybody's sort of heard this little tidbit, but you know, I have this story where it was when I was young, out of college, and one of my cousins had come over and we were making our first big Thanksgiving dinner. And we were going to cook a ham. And so my cousin was lead on cooking this ham. So she got this, you know, big Southern ham, because, you know, my parents and grandparents are from the South there. And first thing she did is she lopped off both sides of this big ham. And she said, okay, first thing we do is, you know, we lop off both ends of the ham. So I started asking, well, why do you cut off the ham? And she's like, you know, that's the way that, you know, Granny always did it. And so I called my mom. I was like, hey, Mom, you know, we're hearing that Granny always, you know, cut off the sides of the ham, and that's what we're doing. Do you know what we're supposed to do? Are we seasoning it or doing something with those sides? And Mama was like, I don't know. That's just the way Granny always did it. So Granny was still living at the time, called Granny. She's like, well, that's the way my mom always did it. But she said, you know why we did it? She said, we did it so we could fit the ham in the oven. So, it had been passed down from generation to generation. And that's sort of a story I heard. It really wasn't my family. But the idea is like these concepts that get passed down from generation to generation, or, in this case, like staff, turnover to staff turnover. It's that tribal knowledge that gets passed down. And over time, people don't even ask the why. And they're just doing these things. So back in the day, ovens were small. And now we have these huge ovens. There's no reason to be cutting off those sides of the ham. So just kind of a fun little story about like, yeah, it's always good, to challenge and kind of as staff turns over is really understanding the why behind why people do things.
It's always about people, right?
It always comes back to people. Yes.
So I have found that people don't understand what Jacobs is or how big of a company it is. Can you just give us a little bit of an idea about, what Jacobs is on an international or US basis?
Oh, goodness. I hope nobody from Jacobs is on the phone because I'm definitely not going to get all the facts right. But we're a very large multinational organization, and we do lots of mergers and acquisitions. So the staff count ebbs and flows a lot, anywhere from like 50 to 80,000. Maybe somebody can Google and see what our current staff count is. But we are an architectural and engineering firm at our core. So that was where we started. And that is, it tends to be the culture of Jacobs, and it's how we are founded, what our focus is. I work with, I'm in the consulting group, right? So so we have this consulting practice that is, I won't say it's outside of the A&E, but it's very much a focus on business management. So it's not, I'm not an engineer, I'm an MBA. I think most people in the consulting group are not engineers. So it's sort of that complement to an engineering firm about, okay, we're not just gonna, design, build it and forget about it, but from an asset management, what happens post capital program, right? So we have about 450 people in North America that are part of our advisory team. Globally, we have about 1,200 people that are part of our consultancy and advisory. So Jacobs is this A&E firm, but we wrap consulting and advisory services around to really complement what our architects and engineers are doing for our clients.
Neat. Yeah, big company. It's good. That's one of the reasons I went to work there, is I went to the website and I thought, this company's trying to do the right thing, and it's hard to do the right thing, but it's if you're not trying, you're not going to get there for sure.
Yeah, and one of the amazing things, and I know you have found this with Jacobs, for the time that you've been a part of the team, is, one of the amazing things about Jacobs is we're so big. So many organizations are already current clients in one way, shape, or form. And we do have a ton of experts in our organization. So it's this amazing organization. The flip side is Jacobs, when we're working internally, it's such a big organization. It presents those challenges, right? Of like finding the right people, finding the right funding, like, okay, this is a client, but how do I connect all the dots? So it's this great, opportunity, sort of this great play field. But, when you're internal, it's like, okay, how do we really align the dots as an organization? Our asset management group within that consulting. So globally consulting is about 1,000. We bring it to North America. I think we're 450-ish. We do consulting in a lot of different spaces. Asset management, there's about 150 of us or so that are doing asset management. Some of those people are condition assessment people, like real boots on the ground, where they're putting eyes and ears on infrastructure. But we have quite a deep bench that's actually doing consulting around best practices and alignment with ISO, and helping organizations get their ISO certification, and developing SAMPs and AMPs and change management and all these things that come along with asset management.
Yeah. I've done consulting with large companies and small companies, and been an asset manager. And it's just always really interesting to understand how organizations work, and how people, organize themselves and get things done. So got a lot of good people. Good job.
Yeah, good.
So one of the things we were excited about when Jacobs, at the end of last year, joined the ALN as a patron member, is we were one of our plans that we're now actualizing was to set up a state and local asset leadership board. So Mike came up with this idea, an approach last year, the year before, of, there's the general principles, but then there's also advantage to connect to people within a specific area. Mike has told the story a couple times on our programs about speaking at the Government Financial Officers Association meeting, and they just were really interested to hear about asset management. So what we're looking to do with Jacobs is we're going to kick this off, and sometime the week of February 19th, I think the 19th is a Sunday, so we could say the week of the 20th. We're going to have an initial organizing meeting for a state and local asset leadership board. And the idea is to have whoever's interested within the existing ALN community and beyond to join us at that call. And we can talk about what's possible, what we can do, and what we can do together to spread the word. We always look for win-win-win situations. So it's a chance for everybody to share information and best practices, whether you're a consultant or a city or a county or a state. It's a chance to understand what's happening. We've had, I know just in our conversations, we've had a lot of people ask us, with a client, say, well, what are other cities doing? Things like questions like that. Any thoughts on getting involved in it?
Well, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to being a part of that. And I know as a consultant, when we start working with a client, I would say 80%, if not more, always want to do what other organizations are doing. Well, what's happening in the industry? What are they doing in Atlanta or LAX? There's always this like really strong desire and thirst for information on what they're not even always like competitors, but most organizations want to be the best of the best, and to know if they are, they need to share. So I think that there is this huge opportunity, in partnership with Mike and Jim with ALN to sort of create more sharing within industries. And I think we all know like the practices and sort of best practices are the same regardless of what industry that we're talking about, but there is terminology and there is deep expertise and those type of things where like organizations like to talk amongst themselves. So I'm really excited. Cities and municipalities really seem to be starting to embrace asset management. And I think creating a forum where they can come together and sort of share, because there are a lot of challenges with cities, right? They have so many different departments. They're so political, oftentimes they're, reporting up to an elected mayor. So there might be turnover every 4, 6, 8 years. They have so many sort of unique challenges. So I'm really excited to be a part of that board as it gets established and watching it grow. And then also hope to do something similar with aviation, where, aviation folks can kind of come together, because it's something that they always ask for. And there's lots of forms, but I think ALN is so unique in what you can offer, because it's almost like you're just creating the space for these organizations to come together without these super structured agendas. And I think that's really valuable and something that isn't necessarily out there in the space of asset management.
Yeah, good, thanks. We Mike and I, in conversations with each other, tend to think of it as creating a nest where something can hatch and grow, and see what we can do to support it. We've done events like this for a couple different areas in the federal space. One for that Grant Thornton sponsored, and is that's part of Grant Thornton is now part of SharePoint, or is that the name? I can't remember the name. Grant Thornton was
Guidehouse.
Guidehouse, that was it. Had put together a group of people involved in federal law enforcement, from Department of Treasury and Bureau of Alcohol and firearms, etc. And it's interesting, they're all in the government doing pretty much the same things, and they had never had a chance to talk to each other before. So it was interesting. Maybe we can do some of those kind of things too.
Yeah, I think so. And it just sort of reminds me, as a consultant, like every time I'm getting engaged with a new client, I get nervous, or even coming to something like this, I get a little bit of, nervousness, because I feel like, well, I don't have any expertise to share really, I just always sort of like question, like, why would someone want to listen to me, or what do I have to offer? So I continue, I'm in my 50s now, and I continue to, have that thought. But what I remind myself as a consultant, and I think, to a certain degree, it's true of ALN, is oftentimes it's not even me bringing in my expertise, it's creating a space, or for me, to use your words, a nest for the organization to just talk amongst themselves.
Mhm.
Oftentimes that's what it is. So, I like to think that I am able to offer like guidance and tidbits of guidance and advice along the way, but oftentimes I feel like the most powerful thing is just creating that space for them to focus and talk and work through these issues. And I often feel I'm most successful as a consultant where it's not me as the expert, but me sort of just facilitating dialogue that, people are the experts, and I'm just helping them to highlight what they already know and where they want to go. And I think it's the same for the ALN, is just this opportunity to bring people together to sort of share information that they already have, but creating that nest, like you said.
There's a similarity in that most organizations are already doing asset management.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't realize that they're doing it, and they're not doing it in a structured or coordinated way. I love the line from ISO 55000 about asset management being coordinating asset management activities. A lot of times we just jump into thinking about the assets, but really, you have a procurement department already, you have a logistics department already, you have a maintenance reliability department, already, and just getting those to coordinate and understand. But where I wanted to get to with that is, you've mentioned a couple times, a couple of my key favorite words, and that is having a vision and talking about why we're doing it. Have any interesting or useful stories or insights on the vision and why?
Yeah, I do. And just to sort of dovetail on what you were saying before, well, I know we're sort of running short on time, so I won't do that. So, we know from change management practices, and what we've learned, if we've been sort of in that space of trying to influence culture, how critical leadership is and that vision at the top. And I do believe that, but I've worked and I'm working with organizations that have that visionary leader, and that don't, and it's like some middle management. One way is not easier than another. Changing a culture of an organization is so challenging. And I think that vision is so critical, but organizations need to create space and roles for people to also focus on it. So it's one thing to have a policy, but having a policy where there's no sort of staff that are assigned to implement the policy is going to be just as challenging if there was no vision in the first place. So that's something pretty common that I have come across, is there might be this great visionary leader, but it sort of stops at that visionary and it doesn't trickle down. I think having that visionary is key, but I also think that there can be people in the organization that can start working these asset management activities, whether it's, maintenance management or Maximo or whatever, and they can build out from there to almost have similar impact if that middle person has the vision. And I think, you've said it before, and I know I'm going to change up how you've said it, but managers aren't leaders. Like, anybody can be a leader. You don't have to be at the top of the organization. You don't have to have staff underneath you, but you might be sort of in the middle part of an organization, right? And if you have that vision and you're somebody that can lead the organization, sometimes you can have just as big of an impact as if there's like this high level, top down visionary. So I've seen it both ways. And I guess what I was going to say real quickly about your earlier comment, and I've seen you do this as a consultant with Jacobs. I think it's super powerful. Like, when you come in, you remind people, clients, you're doing asset management. You're doing these things. There's nothing really new here, other than like sort of tying these things together with one common vision. I think that statement, and I've heard you make it many times, I think it relieves people to realize, yeah, we are doing these things. Can we do them better? Absolutely. But it's not like asset management is something new. So I love you just said it, and I've heard it many times, and I think it really resonates with organizations when it's almost like they can sigh a sigh of relief saying, yeah, we are doing these things, but it's about continuous improvement and always doing things better.
Super. Well, that's excellent. Mike, are we ready to?
No, we're nowhere near ready to end. Jennifer, I want you to say what you said you don't have time to say. So I'm going to just do a formal ending so people who need to leave can move on. But we've got questions that have not been answered, and we want to get to those stories that you said that you want to share. So thank you very much, Jennifer. This has been great and is going to continue to be so. And thank you to Jacobs for sponsoring this ALN Thursday at 3. And thank you to our Platinum organizational member, Onuma, and our patron members, our other organizational members. And also want to remind people that next Tuesday, we have a special value ESG and ISO governance standards program. Then the ongoing series of value and benefits from asset management with the Australian Asset Management Council, February 7th. Then on the 14th, a white paper that we wrote with the Institute of Asset Management. Very excited about that. There's some LinkedIn discussions going on there. So what were you going to say that you didn't have time for?
Well, it was, and I guess I have lots of stories I can tell, but it was it was about Jim and how he always says, you guys are doing asset management. And I just wanted to plug that. That was what I sort of skipped over and came back to. Is I think that's a powerful statement when organizations realize they're already doing most of the components of asset management, and the bigger programmatic, ISO 55,000 is just about the, connectivity across these activities.
So we've got some questions, but I want to ask you a passion question because you appear to be a very passionate person in the conversations I've had with you. Is there anything from your asset management consulting that stands out that you're really happy and proud that the client achieved with your contributions?
Oh my goodness. I think so. I think I would have to go back to LAX because they were my first consulting gig.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was new and, it was kind of one of these things. But we did, through working at all levels of leadership, right, from the, top down, we were able to get the organization to create an organization around asset management. We were able to move them to, partnered up with them to sort of embrace Maximo. They were able to drive down their reactionary work, and we could, because one of the things is like, well, how do we show what's the return on investment in asset management? We hear it all the time. So working with them, we were able to show by being proactive and thinking of your risk from a criticality standpoint, not just, these rote maintenance routines. They were able to drive down their reactionary work. They were able to significantly drive down their overtime throughout the organization. right? By being a very sort of planned, thoughtful organization on how they were going to manage these assets. And in connection with that, we were able to see customer service or traveler experiences go up. So we have some real meaningful data points where you start to see reactionary work going down over years, and you were able to see overtime going down over years. And in response to that, you're able to see customer, like traveler experiences go up. So I'm always sort of proud of that, because it's like I said, it was my first client, and I was there for a really long time, but just being able to quantify something and tell that story. And it was like all aspects, you know, it took all of me to try to like connect with the maintenance guys and be aligned with the IT people, and, you know, shift into my leader mode so I could be talking visionary, you know, it just was like all these different elements need to come together. So I was, you know, kind of working all those different angles, and to see quantifiable results. We don't always get to see that as a consultant, because we're in and out. So that one resonates, I think, with me.
Well, let's go a little deeper in that, because Cecilia Moa asks about how did you create space and broaden the definition of relevant stakeholders to invite not just the usual suspects? And can you speak to ways you helped clients curate the asset of their relationship with interested parties? Because that's what it sounds like you were doing there. So can you go into more? Why did you feel you needed to have these individual outreaches to the different departments?
Well, I think, so we know asset management touches on so many different departments, and Jim was touching upon it. We have procurement, we have planning, we have engineering, we have maintenance, you know, we have senior leadership, we have operations. So we know this from, you know, being asset management practitioners. I am passionate about asset management, and I think relationship building is so key. So as a consultant, and I did this when I worked at CTAC as well, is just building those trusting relationships, and not being the expert in the room, but building trusting relationships with individuals. So at LAX, again, it started in facility management, but I built a relationship with the folks that were sort of struggling with, you know, what had been, you know, what they were charged with doing, which was using Maximo and reducing reactionary work at LAX. I mean, it was a mess to travel. That was their immediate what they needed to address. So building those relationships, helping them be successful, and then expanding the circle of influence, right? And helping, I feel like as a asset management consultant, I also do just a lot of coaching of our clients, not even in asset management, but in how to be a strong leader, how to put presentations together, how to invite others to the table. You know, and that was a lot of what was happening at LAX when I was doing work there. Building those trusting relationships, meeting your commitments, making others look good, highlighting, you know, successes as their successes, you know, not successes of a consultant or successes of me, you know, just, you know, people want to work with, you know, work in that space, and it creates a safe space to invite others into that space. I know that sounds kind of like new agey stuff, but that's, I don't know, that's how I have found my success, I suppose.
It worked. It worked. You said that was the one you're most proud of. So
Yeah,
it worked.
I
yeah,
always think that you could put consultants in two buckets, you know. One bucket is people that take the kind of approach that you said, where it's more the teaching people how to fish and how to get along and how to be successful. And there's the other kind where someone comes in and says, I'm the expert, I'll tell you what to do. If you have a question, come and ask me, and I'm going to be around here a long time. You know, the point is, I'm going to be around here a long time, not that, you know, looking for the win of organizations being able to, you know, take the ball and run. I think that's what we're about, right?
yeah, for sure. And a lot of times, you know, I have this a lot, we have it with current clients, is they know what they need to do, but they just need a consultant to say it on their behalf sometimes. And, you know, consultants know this, the clients know it, and it's like, yeah, we'll help you. We're not necessarily saying anything new. We might say it in a more glossy way with these amazing PowerPoints, But sometimes, we know like, okay, they're not gonna listen to internal staff, but if we hire a consultant and they come in and they hear it from them, then, we'll be able to move this initiative forward. And sometimes, that's the role we're playing, which is okay.
Human nature is very consistent. There's nothing wrong with addressing the frailties of humanity.
I was,
Needing,
Yeah. Yeah.
an early lesson I learned in my career was an expert is somebody from more than 25 miles away.
Wait, say that one again?
An expert is somebody from more than 25 miles away.
Yeah.
It's not the only person you already have. You need somebody else to come.
Yeah, exactly. To tell you what you already know. Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's very true.
well,
Sometimes.
Jennifer, thank you for coming to us all the way from the Seattle area. Are you in Seattle proper?
I'm in San Diego, actually. I relocated
Oh.
a couple years ago.
Oh,
I still do
okay.
have a 206 area code though.
That's why I thought every time I called you, I thought I was calling Seattle. San Diego's pretty nice too.
Yeah. It's beautiful out. Yeah, no, it's lots of fun. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about asset management and kind of supporting the big idea behind asset management, as well as sort of individual client work, and then helping all of our consultants to be successful as well. So
Having fun. It's good.
Well, we look forward to the ALN State and Local Asset Leadership Board and how aviation dovetails into that, because so much of aviation is state and local.
it really is. Yeah.
So there's some kind of overlap there that we'll figure out in terms of how to serve the market best.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. A lot of airports are run by cities for sure.
So, well, thank you. And Jim, thank you for leading the conversation. Thank you to our audience for your live participation. And as Jim likes to point out, so many people like to listen to this and watch this in the future. So thank you too.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mike, for your time. And Jim, as always, it's always a pleasure connecting and chatting about common challenges.
Bye for now.
Bye all.